What's up, guys? Alright, today this video took a little bit longer to release because I didn't want to rush and just put something out there without really taking the time to fully digest the Nintendo Direct stream, because there was a lot of information that was dropped that had many people cheering and a lot of people ranting about certain aspects, which is understandable, but after putting a great deal of thought into all this new information, I am first to say this, alright? Nintendo proved me wrong. My last video on this topic, I was very apprehensive about the build quality, I was worried about the Joy-Cons and the magnets and the performance, but no. The Switch 2's build quality looks absolutely amazing. From the new Joy-Cons being connected via the magnets and only being able to be released by pressing those mysterious rear buttons that we all were speculating about, to the 120 Hz refresh rate, the screen quality, the sound quality. This new system really does feel like they listened to all the complaints from the fans on the Switch 1, and they did a full revamp, bringing this new system into a more mature era of Nintendo products. But that being said, there was one issue that raised some red flags for me. And instead of just ranting here, I want to build kind of like a pros and cons list to see where the system lands, and in the end to really see if I can justify the cost of this new system. And we're going to go ahead and start with the pros. Now, first, the look of the new Nintendo Switch 2. I really do like the look of this system. The ergonomics look fantastic. The Joy-Cons are larger, the screen is bigger, to the subtle blue and red bezels around the joystick. They knocked it out of the park, right? And it doesn't look like a childish toy, you know, and it now looks more like a mature, refined piece of technology. And this is a much welcome update from the company that has been notoriously geared toward younger audiences. The kickstand looks amazing, and Nintendo went further and added small rubber support pads underneath the system, making sure that the Switch 2 will never slip when in kickstand mode. And there was clearly a lot of thought that went into this build, and it definitely shows. And the screen, when I heard it was an LCD display, I thought it wasn't going to look as good, but when comparing this to the OLED version of the Switch 1, which I have, the LCD screen looks better, which just, I don't understand how they did it, but it does. It just looks so much better. And because it has a 120 Hz refresh rate and it's variable, that means games can take advantage of this variability, which is really amazing, especially when it comes down to battery life. You know, in certain games that have more on screen and it can't hit those higher frame rates, I guess you can lock it to 30 or even 40 Hz, which will definitely have impact on the battery life, so that is a plus. The backwards compatibility with an asterisk, and I'm saying it has an asterisk because we'll go over this later, but I feel like this is something that should be offered on all home consoles nowadays. It just makes consumers more likely to buy into the next gen system, which equates to more systems sold, which then means more developers will have the incentive to make more games, and this cycle will continue, creating a healthy and robust gaming library for this new system, avoiding issues that we've seen with, say, the Sony PS Vita. Next, I really like that the internal storage is 256 gigabytes. That's amazing. It has 2 USB-C ports. Amazing. The 3 audio, I can't wait to hear how that sounds. And even though it was to be expected, it has 4K in docked mode. That is a welcome addition. Now, let's get on to the cons list. Now, first, we're going to talk about business tactics to capture you. Yes, you, the paying customer, to pay to play and get into the Nintendo's ecosystem. And when I say pay, I mean pay with a capital P, because oh boy, once you invest your hard-earned money in today's economy, Nintendo expects you, the consumer, to bend over backwards. Because let's break this down. First, the system, right? The Switch 1 was released at an amazing price of $299. This was cheaper than any other competing home console rivals at the time, which made it a huge incentive for people to jump onto the Nintendo bandwagon. The Switch 2, however, the base model is starting at $450 and the bundle is close to 500, well, more than 500 when you're considering taxes. Now, while comparing this system to, say, I don't know, a PC handheld, right? This isn't a big difference. Like when you look at the Steam Deck LCD version with 256 gigabytes, that comes in at $400, which is like $50 cheaper than the Switch 2 base system. Fine, it's not a big deal. But once you make that purchase, and this is where things get very sticky for all you consumers out there, because after all, we aren't just buying a system for the system, right? We're buying a system to play games. And now, as of today, Nintendo has listed 3 different versions of products or games. The first is the digital new releases, which are coming in at $80. Yes, $80 for their flagship games. Okay, certain games like Donkey Kong Bonanza has an MSRP of 70, which is more in line with today's competitor prices, but again, we can only assume that these prices will go up depending on the type of game. For instance, you can bet your dollar that the next Zelda game will not be $70. It's probably going to be 80, if not more, and same goes for any new Pokemon game. And those are two IPs that I absolutely love, and it's the reason why I buy Nintendo products. Second is their physical editions, and these editions are the ones that I usually go for because ownership with digital products has always been speculative, right? Until a company decides to disappear the games you own digitally, these games will be at $90, just shy of $100 for a single game. Third are the games that you already purchased. To be able to make use of your brand new system, you won't be getting a free upgrade. You will be charged an upgrade pass to play games that you've already purchased. Taking all this in, to get started with your new Switch 2 and a few games can theoretically set you back around $630 for a new system and 2 games. That's a lot of money. And here's where it gets worse, because there's more. Because if you want to learn the ins and outs of this new console, their welcome tour, it's not free. Right now, I think it's going to be around $10. I think translated from the yen, it comes in to around $6.12 or something like that. But still, it is not free. They're not including that for your purchase. And this is Nintendo's strategy at large, because they are aiming to charge their customers for almost everything that they can think of. You want to use that new in-game chat? Not only do you have to buy the Switch system, but you also need to buy the camera, which is $50, and then you also need to be a part of their online subscription service. You want to plug in a game that you already own and see those better frame rates? Well, there's the upgrade pack that you need to pay for. And it's clear to me that this initial investment of $450 is only the beginning to a never-ending money printer for Nintendo. And if consumers agree to open their wallets, this cycle will not only continue, but will only get worse. And I'm not just talking for Nintendo fanboys, but the entire gaming industry as a whole. Because bet your bottom dollar that every other company right now is jumping for joy that Nintendo are the ones who are paying up front for this little experiment, and they're all just waiting, salivating, frothing at the prospect that you are that desperate to experience these new games that you're willing to secede and capitulate to these egregious new prices. Because once you do that, mark my words, every other company will follow suit. Now, comparing that to the Steam Deck, once you make that initial investment, not only does that open doors to thousands of free games, but almost every game I can think of are usually discounted in some form, to the point I can't even remember spending more than $40 on any game for that system. And again, I will admit when I'm wrong, the build quality, the Switch 2 looks absolutely fantastic, okay? I'm not just taking a dump on Nintendo here. The ergonomics, the screen, just everything I wish my Switch 1 had is now part of this new system. It's bigger, the joysticks are more robust, and even though I haven't felt it physically in my hands from what I've seen, it really does seem like Nintendo listened to its fans and made the right adjustments for this new flagship product, and the new Donkey Kong game looks ridiculously fun. But this price is where I'm kind of concerned. And, you know, that last video that I posted, there was a magic number in my head. I was hoping that this new system would come in at $399, and this is my point, because back when I had the Xbox 360, Microsoft held a majority market share against the PS3, and there was a system war brewing between Sony and Microsoft, and Sony made a very smart business move that sent shockwaves through the industry, only for them to take over Microsoft as the dominant home console. How did they do that? Well, they knew by undercutting the next Xbox, the PS4 would suddenly find itself in more homes, and when they're in more homes, that means more exclusive games, and the PS4 ended up outselling Microsoft by a lot. For the longest time, I was Team Xbox. The Xbox 360 is still one of my favorite systems to date, and never in a million years did I think I would switch to the PlayStation, because I own 0 PS3 games. It was that magical number that helped Sony take such a large bite out of Microsoft's market share to undercut fans' expectations, and it's a very smart psychological business tactic that would not only give their die-hard fans a nod to their dedication to the brand, but also push those who are never fans at all over the metaphorical fence to divorce themselves from their previous allegiances and join the team that shows you, the gamer, that they are on your side. However, this isn't the case. Nintendo went full Microsoft. And not only are they charging you over $500 after taxes, right, for a system, but to add insult to injury, they are charging their fans for their loyalty. The least they could have done is show some appreciation to those who have, already purchased their products and allow them to have free upgrades free of charge for these games that you bought. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. Like, it's incentivizing you to buy their new system, not the other way around, but now they are incentivizing their bottom line, forcing you into their ecosystem, knowing full and well that you'll probably buy the upgrade, because of course you would. I mean, why would you buy the Switch 2? And this isn't even the worst part. It gets worse, because when I found out that these digital games will be $80 and the physical copies will be $90, I looked into this, and it turns out that some of these physical copies aren't even a physical copy. They're just a license that's on that cartridge that allows you to download the game. So in theory, what are you buying? Because if it's only that and it doesn't include the game, what happens when the Switch 3 or the Switch 4 comes out and Nintendo decides to stop supporting Switch 2 games? What happens with those physical copies? The $90 that you spent? And this is where I think the cons list outweighs the pros. Granted, I was still on the fence even when I made my last video. I'm not a huge Nintendo fan, and I understand that there are people out there who love Nintendo and they love their games. I understand that. But I think it comes down to the math. Like, you really need to ask yourselves, like, are you willing to spend close to $1,000 for the system and a few games and the camera and their subscription? And then, this cycle will continue. The next year when there's 5 or 6 games that comes out that just look super enticing, I mean, are you willing to spend close to $500, which is the price of an entire system for those 5 games? And their online services, $3.99 a month. Do you really think that it's going to continue to only be $3.99 a month? No, they want you to get into their ecosystem. Once you are so invested and you've spent so much money, and they raise those monthly prices for their online services to say $10, you're not going to say, oh, screw it, I'm not going to have online services, because you invested so much money in their games. So this is their tactic. It's like we were trying to capture as many people and we're trying to push people, and we were looking for that breaking point. Where is that breaking point? And Nintendo is testing that breaking point right now. And if people, which I assume everyone who wanted a Switch, they have their mindset. I'm not here to change your mind, right? They're going to buy it. But what this means for the gaming industry as a whole, you're going to see this trickle-down effect. It's just going to ripple throughout the industry. And GTA, same thing, $100 game. And then every other game that comes out after it, they're going to start raising their prices. And gaming is only going to push out a lot of those people who just can't afford $100 for a single game. Granted, everything else in life is getting more and more expensive, right? So people are really going to have to take into account, like, is gaming that important to me where I have to invest that much money just to experience these new games? And I'm going to be honest, the Mario Kart game looks fun, but the other day I popped in Mario Kart 64 and I had the same amount of fun playing Mario Kart 64 as I did with the new Switch 1 game, the new Mario Kart. And at the end of the day, it's all about experiences. That's what we're paying for. We are paying for those experiences. And if I'm getting the same experiences, if not sometimes better, because I am a huge retro game fan, and currently I've been finding myself having better experiences with older titles, retro games, than some of the newer titles, it really makes me wonder, like, where the gaming industry as a whole is heading. So yeah, this Nintendo Direct stream doesn't change my mind. It only reinforces my apprehension in buying this new system. Yes, it looks like an amazing new system, but is it worth the price of admission? For me, it is not. them inflating the prices of all their accessories and all their games, it's just too steep for me, and I don't want to be a proponent to telling the rest of the gaming industry that I'm okay with those prices. And the last video was definitely one of the most divisive videos I made. And I assumed that that was gonna be the case because, you know, when you're a fanboy, anytime you are rooting for a team, your team can do no wrong, and you are more likely to look past those wrongdoings of said company. Like, you just don't care. And lastly, Nintendo did put out a statement about the upcoming tariffs on pricing. Like, we don't know if these are the actual prices. For all we know, they might tack on another 20, 30, 40%. So we're gonna have to wait. But compounding these issues between their egregious prices and international tariffs, like, this is all going to hurt Nintendo. And I do think that there are a large portion of people who are sound-minded, who understand what these implications are and what it means to the gaming industry as a whole. And knowing that Nintendo will probably come out with a refresh of the Switch 2 and have an OLED screen and maybe a faster processor. I don't know. They're going to do an upgrade in the future. It only makes me feel that Nintendo is going to see less people buying the Switch 2. Those are my predictions. We'll see if I'm right, and if I'm wrong, you can come here and tell me I'm an idiot. It doesn't bother me one bit. However, I think I'm right. I think Nintendo, they're going to see a steep decline. They're not going to make the same amount of sales as they did with the Switch 1, because let's be honest, the Switch 1 at that price point, a lot of people, including myself, were spontaneous purchases. I just randomly was walking through a store, I saw that the Switch 1 was in stock, and I'm like, you know what, I'll get it. I really want to experience the new Zelda. And I played Zelda a lot, and I bought all the new Pokemon games, but ever since buying the Steam Deck, I haven't picked up my Nintendo Switch because the Steam Deck is that good of a system, and I have thousands of games in my backlog via the Steam store because the Steam sales, it's almost impossible not to take advantage of games when they're being sold for $2. So in conclusion, thank you for watching this video. We'll see if my predictions come true or not. If you think I am absolutely wrong, or if I am missing certain points that you might have spotted or seen, let me know in the comments. I hope to chat with you soon. I'll see you next time.